So here's the bench at the moment, looking a bit of a mess, and we're working on a studio scale Narcissus from Alien. It's a full studio scale. You can see by the size of my hand there, this thing is very large. It's probably about 30 inches long, good size, a bit like the studio scale Millennium Falcon. This one is a tester. I had to build something to test the paint, test the way that I was putting it together, and also test where the discrepancies might be in the finished model. And I'll show you the finished model right now. So that other one was a tester and a preliminary model build for this one. This is the same thing, full studio scale, but this is cut in acrylic with all cut panels on the surface. All the discrepancies in this model, it was never symmetrical, so the original model has been replicated in this, all the offsets, all the differences, and this one features an interior that I'll show you later, but at the moment we're just going to concentrate on the greeblies. So I'm going to do a bit of greebly application just so you can see what I do. So here we have a hatch from underneath the rear end of the model. There's two 3D printed parts in that, but the rest of it are actually either cast from an original or are original pieces. So we've got all the original parts from all the original model kits all laid out, ready to be greeblied up. You can see the 3D printed parts that came with the kit and the real parts that are going to replace them in each drawer. What a fantastic kit this is. So here we have one of the plan pages for the lower hatch. You can see now the plan next to it and all the various parts and their placement on the panel. It's completely made out of 3mm machined perspex. All the panels are separate. You can see there's a top section where I've sanded. You can see the different panels between the two areas here. This kit deserves a mention. Designed, researched like a lunatic with some serious time and effort. A guy called Mark Ingplan has put this together. It's an incredible piece of work. All the greeblies are laid out with a one-to-one plan that directly overlays on the model itself. It's identical in every way to the original filming miniature. The nose on it is 1mm longer on one side than the other. It's all offset. The panels don't line up perfectly because they're not supposed to. On the original model they're different. The thickness of each one of these pieces, this is slightly thicker on that side than this side. Both sides are asymmetric. They're not perfectly the same. The nose is asymmetric, the panels line up on the nose in exactly the same way they don't on the original, if you understand what I mean. Which makes it a ridiculously tricky model to put together, because when you're putting it together you naturally want to line all these parts up perfectly. But on the original miniature they weren't lined up perfectly, so you have to follow the plan, which Mark has been unbelievably fastidious with. And it's great. So there we go, we're still working on this one, and now moving on to greeblying the rear airlock hatch. So just scraping away some of the primer to reveal the surface of the perspex. Has to be textured underneath each panel to make sure the glue's going to adhere to it. We've got a border taped down that matches the width of the border on the main design here, down each side. That's taped in, so that all we have to do now is place this piece into the corner, put it up nice. We know we've got it as parallel as it needs to be to match the thing, which is not necessarily straight, we're following it, and that needs sticking down. So what we do here is we take tiny bit of thick super glue, I'll show you what we're doing. We make sure that all the surfaces on the bottom are smooth and we've got no overhangs on the edge of the lips that's going to stop this thing getting flush. So we take a little bit of super glue, take a tiny bit, you don't need a lot, we'll see why in a minute. Just a small amount in the centre, tiny bit. You don't want this to go anywhere near the edges when you press it down, so we're doing it fairly controlled. We take this piece, butt it up to the corner, put it into position, press it hard down in the middle. That will move the material, the glue, from the centre towards the edges. But we've not put enough glue on to let it flow out. All we're trying to do is locate this part with a good solid central mount. Because this has got to live on the shelves for years. If this thing pings off in 3 weeks, no one's going to be happy. So the two borders allow us to push it down and it won't move, it won't float around on that layer of glue because we've got something to encapsulate it and keep it in position. After about 15 seconds or so, even the thick CA glue will have kicked off in the centre. So that's probably okay. I'm going to take it off. We're all glued down in position. Gives us a tiny bit of wiggle room if we need to because of the thick. And we take off the two borders. If we can get the tape out. And you should see there's no glue coming around the edges there. Nothing glue, nothing coming out. To fully seal those edges for the paint job, we take super thin CA glue and just feed an edge and it will capillary action all the way around and seal that joint. Once that's sealed, you're ready for paint. So, there we go, 2 panels on, working for the next one. Next panel applied in the same way, couple of spacers, little piece, flat on the bottom, tiny little bit of CA, popped into place, onto the next one. Right, so we've been busy at it for a couple of days now. We've got a few other bits on here. We've got the dam sections set up on the rear now with all the various greeblies. All those have been put in place. CA glue around the edge. Details on the bottom with these sections are in, as you've just seen. Got this side on, got the dam section in. All the greeblies tucked down the back there I put in first before I put this on because it makes it a bit easier. And as we come round, centre section's getting built up now with the 223 chassis and all the other various bits from M16s and what have you. And now on here I'm about to tackle this complex greebly set here. So what I've done is printed out a 1:1 scale version of this, cut it so it sits in place. I'm going to use that, cut out the major positioning of the large pieces, and then I'll be able to mark those properly on the model itself, add those in the correct spots, checking that the greeblies that I've got, which are real and not 3D printed, which will be slightly different than these, actually fit together once I've got these in place. So a little bit of testing, a little bit of trial, get all the pieces in place, measure them, make sure they fit, and then cut these, reference them, and add them to the model. Ta-da! Okay, so we've worked out all the various different bits from all the different model kits. Some of these are cut parts, like this section here is part of a long axle type arrangement, aerial thing. That's got to be trimmed down, flattened down on the back side. They all sit fairly well, looking pretty good. So now we've got those laid out, we can now start to try and transfer each individual component onto the model. Right, so we've taken our piece of printed paper that I photocopied off the plans. I've cut out the corners of the little ones and the bigger ones. We lay that over the top of this panel now. I've marked out all the different corners on each particular greebly, all the main ones, and then mark them onto the material itself with pencil, and then scraped away the areas underneath to reveal the perspex so the glue gets a good bond. And now I'm going to place each one of those pieces onto those relevant marks and double check the distances before I glue them down, and then we're off. Some of the pieces that go onto here, you can see, are very small. They're double-sided with detail, so we have to sand down the opposite side to the side that we want to fit onto the model. Hope you can see that. And on the other side, we've got the same thing done, matched out to fit the pieces. Oh, looking good. Oh yeah, right on. Right, so on to the next bit. One of the next things I've got to do is fit this. It's from the Tyrrell 6-wheel kit. I think it's a 1/12. This has been extensively trimmed to fit along this edge on the main model here. Fits into that position and shrouds all that detail. Fits quite well. On the corner here it needs to be trimmed, so there's a panel that fits onto that corner, which is this panel here that has been put onto the airlock, which you saw a minute ago. This bit's got to fit on the side of that. There's only 2 of these in each kit, and these kits are quite rare, so what do? You make a mould of all the kit parts that you need to duplicate. So these are the 2 door sections here. I've cast those and made a set of doors that fit onto that position there. So now we can have 6 doors instead of buying 3 kits, which is stupid money. This fits onto here, and this angle now has to be trimmed to fit those. This is the piece that we need to trim to fit on this side. You can see the angle difference on the edges there, but don't copy the other one. Always trim to fit what you're using. So this one now gets marked to fit that panel just there, and we trim that off. There we go. Slight overlap on the inside edge there, because there's another panel to fit inside here that runs at 90 degrees to this one to fill in the gap after this piece is fitted around the back of here. So you can see there's a little gap just at the back side here that needs a triangular piece fitted. That's why the other details on the side are not fitted until this piece goes on, because I need to get an alignment position off this to register the other ones. So that's it so far. Hope you like it. And you can see the detail and the work this guy's put into this. It's a pleasure to build this model. It's insanely time consuming, but ridiculously good quality. So you're never going to find one better than this, I don't think.